Hi, today we are going to interview the wonderful Dr. Amy Grimm of Daring DMV. She is helping veterinarians live their best life while practicing veterinary medicine. So let's hear what Amy has to say. And remember to like us and to give us a 5-star review and share the podcast with those who might benefit from it. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to come and speak with you. Share us so that others can know all about us. Thank you so much, and let's hear what Amy has to say.
Why Do Pets Matter? 10 years ago, with my iPhone and a script, I recorded the first episode of the Ultimate Pet Resolution Summit, which chatted with experts about conflicts over animals. Our conversations were intimate, honest, and illustrated how disagreements over animals occur and how those disagreements can reshape people's lives and relationships. In November 2019, I started Why Do Pets Matter, a new podcast that continued these informative discussions. I'm so excited to have you here with me, continuing my exploration into a more meaningful conversation about why pets matter to all of us. My guests and I will share ideas, stories, and experiences straight from the heart, unscripted and holistic. From the bravest moments to the most brokenhearted, we will explore how to resolve disagreements over animals differently. One thing I know for sure is I want to have more meaningful conversations that will help all of us unlock that deeply felt human-animal bond that drives the emotions of conflict.
Hi, everyone. Debra Hamilton, Hamilton Law Mediation, the Why Do Pets Matter podcast. And I'm here with Dr. Amy Grimm of Daring DVM Coaching. She's a veterinarian and she's coaching veterinarians on how to be their best selves and live their best lives. Amy, thanks so much for being here. I'm so glad you're here.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today, Deborah.
We met during a call where Amy was talking about her coaching and how she's helping veterinarians communicate better. And it was so interesting because it resonated so well with me that I said to her, you have to come talk to my Why Do Pets Matter podcast people. I only asked one question, Amy, and that question is, why do pets matter to you?
That is such an important question, and I think my perspective has changed from the time I was just a practicing veterinarian to now that I'm also a life coach, because I did fall into the trap of thinking that, pets are like you only deserve a pet if you can afford one or if you have the ability to take care of one, which personally I think causes a lot of unnecessary conflict, internal conflict for a lot of veterinarians. But now through like the own personal work that I've done and also working with clients and just learning more, my perspective has really just changed to how important that human animal bond is. And I mean, ultimately, I think that's really why pets matter. And the work that I do today with coaching, a lot of it is nervous system based and learning how to calm yourself during stressful events and also create the capacity to have a bigger, fuller, more beautiful life. And those can be scary things. And what we need to learn to do ourselves in those moments is learn how to self-regulate and kind of bring that level of stress down. And when it comes to the human-animal bond, our pets can do that for us. Our nervous systems do this really cool thing called neuroception, where they talk between each other, and this happens all the time. And it's not just human to human, it's your nervous system to the other nervous systems around you. And as we all know as veterinarians, all of these animals have nervous systems. And that's why it can feel so comforting to, hug your dog, pet your cat, even if you go outside and you're feeding your horses or your chickens. There's just this level of peace that comes with that. And that's because their nervous system is helping yours co-regulate. It's part of this deeper connection, the sense of belonging. There's no judgment. Like, this is the purest form of unconditional love and acceptance from them. And then I come back to, that original version of me who somehow thought not everybody deserves this because of maybe systemic issues, financial problems, just things that have happened in their life where maybe they're not able to provide the kind of care that you think is appropriate or necessary, but how important those relationships are to those people who are going through tough moments. And like that pet, they're there when they walk through the door, when they're struggling to get out of bed, when they just need someone or something around to help calm them or uplift them. I mean, there's so many physiological and like mental, emotional benefits that we get from these connections. Who am I to say that not everybody is deserving? And that's really one of my biggest pushes now in the work that I do, because I think pets can provide just so much relief and companionship and help us with our own mental health and well-being. And I mean, yeah, that's why they're so important.
So pets, I know it is really an aha moment when we recognize that pets aren't just for the people who have privilege and can take care of them, but sometimes they keep people who are really struggling from being totally burned out and feeling adrift. They're
Yeah.
around them and they help them get out of bed in the morning and go to work or do whatever it is that they're doing because they have these pets who really create that environment. I always, when I talk to people in conflict, I try to, especially if it's over animals or it's with someone in a pet service environment, I often say to them, well, let's start with trying to be the person our pet thinks we are. So when they're angry or when they really want to get even, I said, let's just try to think about what our pets would think of what we're doing now. Because yes, this happened or that happened. And would it be possible to think of it a little differently if we were thinking about it like our pets did or how our pets would expect us to do it? So you were perfectly pointing out that we sometimes start from a position where, well, if you can't take care of a pet, you shouldn't really have a pet. And often the people who are living, say, paycheck to paycheck, the pets are keeping them able to work paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, and I love what you brought up there about what will your pet think about you. I think that's just a fantastic way to think about it. And I was thinking about that in terms of some of the work that I do now in helping people heal from burnout or when they feel like they're burning out. And one of the biggest, like most successful tools is learning how to show yourself self-compassion, because we just tend to beat ourselves up, and many of us, we have these harsh inner critic voices and we talk to ourselves really meanly when things don't go the way that we want, and that just adds fuel to the fire. That's just going to make the problem worse. And one of the things that I do is ask people to imagine, how they show up for their pets, that kind of love and compassion that they extend to them when essentially they do nothing, right? They just exist and we love them. And sometimes they do things like poop on the floor or eat our shoes or vomit in the bed, all of these things. And we just love them anyway. We accept them anyway. And learning how to turn that kind of compassion inward is really healing. And yeah, I just love that question about like, what would your pet think of your behavior? I totally resonate with that.
And you said something before that I thought was really interesting about energy. So when you bring the energy home of frustration or distress, your pet picks up on that and they likely want to absorb that for or from you to regulate you. It's amazing how pets know. Like before we got on, everyone, I will tell you that I've been sitting here for 2 hours. And poor Amy had to wait for my Irish setter to lick my whole face because he's like, wait, you've been up in 2 hours, you need to stand up. Our pets know what it is we need. Our pets supply us with that. And as veterinarians, often we might not use that to our advantage in an examination room where some maybe unfortunate things happen, to diffuse the possible negative input to make it more positive input, which is what the pet would expect, because hardly any pet goes to the vet happily. I mean, some of them do, but most of them are like, I'm not so sure I want to be here. And that sort of creates that energy in the client, which a veterinarian will walk into the room and maybe be met with an unfortunate statement or comment or whatever. And what do you do in your coaching? Because I know this is part of what you do. What do you do in your coaching to help the veterinarian know you may not be meeting this client on their best day? They
Hmm.
might be worried about their pets, especially cat owners, right? Because cats really hate to go to the vet. Dogs hate to go to the vet too, but there might be a few like mine who happily go to the vet. Um, what do you do? Because it really creates um, that bias. Oh my God, this person is going to complain first thing out of the box about how long they waited in the waiting room or whatever the front desk people did or didn't do. Or how do you coach your clients and your colleagues to handle that in a way that sort of appreciates and acknowledges, doesn't mean you agree, but then creates that pathway to a more peaceful conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you already touched on it earlier when you were saying it's not about you. Really, the biggest realization is that not everything is about you, and you have no idea what is going on in that person's life, what struggles they're currently facing, if they have any financial issues. And along with that, a lot of times can come guilt and shame because these people, they are coming to you in a very vulnerable state, knowing that I really care about my pet and I'm bringing my pet to you, and I'm going to have to tell you that maybe I can't take care of them in the way that you recommend. And as a doctor, you're seen as a person of authority, and people want to do what you recommend. And with that, there can come a very big disconnect, and they can feel a lot of shame and guilt and have these emotions. And if they're already expecting that before coming in, they could be kind of fired up already, or they may come in with expectations of cost that do not match the reality of what that actually is. And in that case, it's almost like an additional surprise or shock in the exam room, thinking that you can come in and help and, do what you want to do, and realizing, oh no, I cannot. And our immediate reaction when we're in these states is to go into fight or flight. Our threat response is activated, and we do the things like, one, fight, become frustrated, angry, yell about the price, maybe tell the veterinarian that I don't care, or that the veterinarian doesn't care, or they're only in it for the money. There's like the fleeing, which is just the no, 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 I don't want to do anything now. I just give me my pet back. I want to get out of here so I can get back to safety. They may just freeze, and sometimes those are the clients who seem really indecisive and they just don't know what to do, and you leave them in the exam room for 10 minutes to call their partner and discuss, and you come back and they still don't know what it is. Like, those are all very normal human reactions, and they have nothing to do with you, but helping them through that has everything to do with you. So I really like to start by connecting that awareness, because it really speaks to how we come into the exam room. I remember as a newer graduate, I was trained by a mentor who was very into business and having things run efficiently. And I can look back on some of those appointments that I went into where I just came in through the door and just wanted to get down to business and not give the pet time to acclimate to me or have any kind of like interaction with the client, because this shouldn't slow me down. I've got other pets to see. And that's such a different energy that you're coming in with and you're presenting, and your nervous system is communicating on an unconscious level to the client and the pet. So, really stepping back and saying, okay, how is it that I want to show up? And part of that is really understanding your own core values. And I highly recommend to any person, whether they're a client or not, if you don't already understand your own strengths and your core values, go take one of those online assessments. It is so worth it because that helps you see what you value and how you can bring that into the exam room. And those appointments, they start feeling less stressed, less rushed when you're able to start meeting some of those values. And that's how you get to actually pause and reflect and take in the whole situation and not just automatically react to whatever the client is bringing in there. You can actually be an anchor for yourself and for them, which is going to be far more conducive to having an open conversation and figuring out what the actual problem is and how to work towards a solution rather than you just dismissing them or getting angry back at them or thinking that they don't care or they obviously don't respect you because they looked at Dr. Google beforehand. Like there's so much of that that we bring into an exam room that we're not even aware of.
I know it's so important to recognize that because, we both talked about the story we tell ourselves. And that story can sometimes be really wonderful if you can tell yourself the story that, well, Amy maybe had a bad day today. Maybe she's waited a long time, or maybe the doctor has been really rushed all day today, or maybe they just had to put a dog down that, has been a patient for a long time and they're emotional. None of these conversations are shared because it may not be appropriate or whatever, but you're still living that life in that body at that time. And you're bringing that
Mhm.
with you into the exam room as a client and into the exam room as a doctor. And how we tell ourselves a story that's much less biased. Amy is the vet is doing this because she's a mean person and she's only in it for the money. Or Amy, the client, is just being really rude and obnoxious to all of us. And it's really strange because she really isn't always like this. And to stop and take a moment and breathe and maybe
Yes.
recognize that Amy the vet has had a really bad day or Amy the client is having a really bad day. And how can we, I loved when you said, just take a minute to ground yourself, which will help everybody in the room assess what they're feeling. I always say to my clients, like you say to your clients, when you feel the hair on the back of your neck coming up, start to breathe. Breathe in 4, hold 4, breathe out 4. Because often when that happens, you're going from your prefrontal cortex, where you can actually make great executive decisions, into your amygdala, where if that's gone, it's out the window. You are going to be reactive and defensive, whether you're a client or a vet. And then if that happens, because it often does, and I'm sure you have clients who say, when I walked out of the room, I said, I can't believe I just said that. And you're like, yeah, it's okay. We have those moments. I'm not perfect. And we had spoken before that you had to get over the perfection need. We all have to get over that, clients and veterinarians and lawyers. But how do you then say, I want to appreciate that I might not have said that in the best way I could have. And I appreciate you giving me a moment to clarify. I mean, I'm sure that's what you do with your clients too, because sometimes you get so hung up on being right that you don't work on how can we get this right.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that also speaks a lot to the values that you're upholding and what you want to bring into the exam room with you. Like, is your value that the doctor's always right? I'm always right, and I'm just going to come in there and tell you how it is, and this is what it's going to be. Like, take a look at that. Is that something that is unconsciously playing out in the story you tell yourself versus I want to come in with connection. I want to come in with compassion, and that's going to set you up in a much better space. Yes, something can happen in there that could be activating to your nervous system, and you may be triggered into that fight, flight, or freeze. And yeah, we're not perfect. Maybe you end up saying something that you didn't mean to say, or you were just really short and curt with them instead of giving them the time to ask the questions. Maybe you were dismissive. And if that's the case, if you're outside of that exam room, then reflecting on it, it's perfectly fine to go back in and have a conversation with them. And I think that's so important because veterinarians oftentimes, what I'll see in some of the Facebook groups is a lot of complaining about how rude the client was, how disrespectful they were. Oh, and you know what? 2 days later, they came back and apologized and said, you know what? I had some other stuff going on in my life, and I realized that I shouldn't have raised my voice or said those things. And, I would really like to keep coming here. This is my apology. I very rarely ever see that coming from the side of the veterinarian. Both of us are humans in this interaction. Both of us are going to make mistakes. And just like that client came back and made an apology, you can go back into that room and do the same. And it doesn't mean that they're going to see you as less of a doctor or potentially hold a grudge against you. It's going to open it up to a much better conversation and place of understanding. And yeah, sometimes they're not going to want to work with you again, and that's just life. It's 50-50. But I find the majority of the time, if you can actually connect on that human level instead of just the doctor-client dynamic, it can really be a much more satisfying relationship and ultimately help you both move towards the goal you have for this particular patient's care.
Yeah, because you're all in it for the pet, right? Everybody's there. You can all agree that we're all working toward making sure Fluffy or Spot have the best care possible, given everybody's parameters, your experience, the money available, everything. I love, it's a lot of vets will watch this, will say, well, I don't have time to go back in because I've got to go see the other person. And that's okay too. What's really great is if you write a card and say, Ms. Grimm, I'm so glad that you brought Fluffy in. I think that we maybe had a conversation that wasn't exactly what either of us intended. I wished it had gone better, and I hope next time we can have conversation, or maybe if you would like, we would be able to talk at the end of the day. I have time. I set aside time from 5 to 6 on Thursday, whatever, to talk to clients, and I'd love to pick up the phone, call you, and talk about what we were talking about, because I'm one of these unicorns, right? So I talk to the clients who are angry with the veterinarians and the veterinarians who are angry with the clients. Not just one, but the other. I always say, you really want to talk to me because I sort of know both sides of the coin, and I'm not going to share that information, but I'm going to share how they're thinking. And most of the time, the clients go, oh, I didn't know the vet had a bad day and maybe had just euthanized a dog that he'd known for 15 years and he was emotional. And so he wasn't himself. It seemed like he wasn't himself, but he shouldn't talk to me that way, or she shouldn't talk to me that way. And I go, absolutely. And with veterinarians, they'll say the same thing. Well, how dare they talk to me that way? And I'm not going to let people talk to me that way. And I said, I get it. I said, and no one should ever talk to you that way. And were you curious to, not maybe at that moment, because everybody's, but maybe a little later, say, it was so out of character for our relationship to spiral out of control that way. Was anything going on? Because if we didn't meet the mark that you expected, or something was going on with you, like you said, they come back in and they say, I just had a fight with my wife yesterday, and when I was here, I sort of took it out on you. Which is typical, right? The veterinarians say, see, they came back and apologized. And I love that you said, and do you ever do the same thing? When you say,
Mhm.
I just probably didn't say that. Because, as I said, you go from your prefrontal cortex to your amygdala in like 10 seconds. And I often say to my veterinarians who take, courses like your coaching as well, breathe.
Yes.
You want to say something, breathe in, hold it, breathe out, breathe in, hold it, breathe out, because they're not going to see it. And then because I'm a lawyer, and most veterinarians say to me, well, I don't know what to say, so that, if they want to sue me, I won't have said something that's going to be compromising. I said, the catch-all that I always tell all my veterinarians is, this isn't how any of us wanted this to turn out.
Mhm.
Because the vet didn't come in this day to have an argument with a client. And the client probably didn't come in to have an argument with their vet. That's not what they set out in the morning to do. And yet that's what occurred. And as you said, let's have a little grace and say, maybe I wasn't my best. And it shouldn't be one-sided, the apology. I love that, Amy, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And it has to be sort of heartfelt and able to be acknowledged and appreciated that we both weren't our best selves that day. And to go back to my first statement about be the person your dog thinks you are, and I'm sure Fluffy was embarrassed at our interaction, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I really loved what you said about this isn't typical of our relationship. I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it because it's internally taking responsibility and it's also not placing blame or putting the other person in an even more defensive position. And I think, yeah, just using little language tweaks like that can be so important. And I think it's also a reason why coaching can be very helpful or working with somebody like yourself can be so helpful because when you're in that stress response, you don't think of using language like that. It's just me or them. Like it's you versus the world.
Right,
And
it's that
there's
defensive mode, that reactive mode. And once you get a handle on it, it took me years. So I'm going to say to everyone, it took me years to be able to do this. I was a litigator and I used to stand firm for everything. And then I realized I wasn't really serving my client, which ultimately was the pet, right? So your client is
Mhm.
ultimately the pet. So bringing everyone along to make sure that we all keep the pet's best interest, whether it's divorce or veterinarians or pet service providers or whatever. If we think that way, then we can say, well, I'm just going to take a step back and say, maybe we need to talk about how we can work better together, and maybe we can't work better together, and maybe I need to move on. However, give it a try, right?
Yeah. Yeah, give it a try and be open to the solution because, like you just said, sometimes there isn't a solution. And I think for veterinarians, sort of touching on what you and I spoke about before we started recording, we have a lot of perfectionist tendencies. And the lie that our brain tells us is that there should be a solution. There is a solution. There's only one solution. It's the right solution. And if you're not on board with me with the solution, then, we are at odds. And really, the reframe is that there are choices, there's multiple possibilities. And then it once again comes down to how are you going to show up and have this conversation so that you can get on the same page. And one of the things that I think is very helpful for veterinarians or other shift workers, people who might not have full control of their schedule, maybe they have a little bit, is really utilizing little micro breaks or micro moments to help calm your nervous system and bring that level of tension down. So, breathing before you go into that exam room, take a few deep breaths with some long exhales. Bring yourself to the present moment. You can do a grounding exercise where you name things that you see and you can touch and smell. Even just focusing on washing your hands between patients, like we all do this anyway, feel the water on your hands, the warmth, the soap, the smell. Just take a minute to kind of come into the present because your brain, it can go to the future, the past, worry about a whole bunch of things, but your body is always in the present moment. And if you're thinking about setting yourself up for a successful interaction, you want to bring yourself into the present moment, get out of that survival brain and start reconnecting with your prefrontal cortex because that's where all of your executive skills are housed.
I love that because I think that if it may sound woo woo, however, it isn't. It really is self care because you
Mhm.
are just ground. You can only control yourself. I always say that when I talk to my clients, either the pet owners or the veterinarians or whomever. You can only control yourself. You can never control Amy. You can never control Deborah. You can only control yourself. And so if you decide to take those what is it? Take us 30 seconds to wash our hands. Those 30 seconds to do just what
Hmm.
you said. Just feel the hot water, feel the soap. And as you were saying that, I said, God, I would love to have lavender soap because then I could smell the lavender and wouldn't that calm me down? So do these little things which will make you be in the present, which coming full circle is where our pets are, which is why they give us unconditional love and don't remember what we did before and don't expect us to do anything in the future. They just want us to be here and now, which is what you do in your work and what I do in my work. Just be present and take care of yourself, which means you can take care of others more fully.
Yeah, and speaking of lavender, that's exactly what I did right before hopping on this call because it can be a little bit exciting and I feel my heart rate going up a bit coming on as a guest, and I have some lavender lotion here at my desk that I put on my hands and rub that in and breathed before hopping on. And it sounds so simple and so silly, but these things, they make a huge difference. And yeah, like you said, it's not just woo-woo. Maybe we thought that years ago, but now we have things like functional MRIs and, the actual lab work that can show us what's happening in our body, with our cortisol levels and adrenaline and how that lights up different areas of the brain. And it's science. And if you're a veterinarian, you love science. So this work, like it is for you. You can find a way to connect with it and bring it into your practice. Because when your clients thrive, their pets thrive. And when their pets thrive, they thrive. And ultimately, that's a win-win for
And you
everybody.
thrive as the veterinarian. Amy,
Yeah.
know how to get in touch with you because I know after this, people are going to want to reach out to you. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on my website. That's daringdvm.com. So if you're interested in finding out more about what I do or how we can work together, hop over there. If you want a quick little introduction to some of the tools that I teach, I do have a fun little freebie. It's called the Burnout Fix, and it'll actually walk you through what's happening in your nervous system and how to get yourself out of that stress spiral. And yeah, you can come say hi to me on Instagram at DaringDVM or find me as Amy Grimm on LinkedIn. I love communicating with people and getting to know them and answering questions. So send me a DM, a message, and I'll reply to you.
Wow, I am so glad you came on Why Do Pets Matter? Because it's so important for us to recognize what people are feeling. And my audience consists of lawyers and pet owners, breeders, handlers, veterinarians, vet techs, you name it, groomers, because pets matter to all of us. So thank you so much, Amy, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. It was delightful. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Well, everyone, this is Deborah Hamilton, and I'm so glad you were here. Remember to like this podcast, give it 5 stars, and share it with your friends because we're trying to make everybody's life so much better. And why do pets matter to you? Because they love us unconditionally. Give your birds, your horses, your dogs, your cats, your snakes, your lizards a kiss from me. Also, your turtles. And until next time, this is Deborah Hamilton. Take care.